Back when I was in high school, my friends and I loved exploring creepy places. A few of us had our driver's licenses, so on weekend nights, we would gather a group of 6 to 10 people and go on an adventure. One summer, our favorite place to go was this abandoned movie theater on the west end of town. This place had probably closed down about 3 years before we started visiting it, and in that time, it had become a rundown building. There were no trespassing signs on the front entrance and each of the fire exits around the building coming from the theater rooms. The glass of the main entrance was all broken and had been boarded up. The front door was busted and didn't latch or lock, so people were able to get inside. We knew there had to be homeless people crashing in there, but we were young and dumb and felt invincible as a group. It was part of what made it scary. We would always wait until between 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. to get into places like this because we didn't want anyone to see or hear us or report us to the cops. We all explored it together the first 2 times we went in. The screens and seats were all torn up inside each of the 8 rooms. The bathroom mirrors were broken, and there was graffiti everywhere. We were fairly sure there were people hiding in there while we were inside, even if we never saw anyone. The first 2 times we went in, there were a couple of shopping carts from a nearby Fred Meyer's inside with cans and bottles in them, and a few dirty blankets scattered around in different rooms. It looked lived in. After getting to know the layout of the place the first couple of trips, we made a game of it. For the 3rd and final visit this time, there were 6 of us that went, split into 3 groups of 2. With our partner, the 2 of us would enter the front together and spend 4 to 5 minutes inside while the other waited outside at our chosen exit in the back of the building. The first 2, Beck and Doug, both went in while we waited outside. About 7 minutes went by, and just as we were starting to worry that we should go in after them, they made it out the other side through the fire exit. Doug told us that they went upstairs into the office, and there was a sleeping bag there that hadn't been there on the previous visit. As soon as they went up there and saw it, they tried to leave immediately. But they turned around and tried to leave through the wrong exit. They were paranoid that they were being followed out, so they just stood there watching their way into the theater room for a minute, making sure they didn't hear any noise before finally working up the nerve to run out the right exit and run across the hallway. Both Doug and Beck wanted us to leave, but Jack and I weren't having any of that and insisted on going in. Brad and Drew, the other 2 of the group that were going to go in last, wanted to come with us, so the 4 of us went inside while Beck and Doug both waited at the exit. The first thing we all wanted to do when we got inside was to go check out the upstairs office. Just as we started to make our way up the stairs, we all heard a loud banging sound. It was coming from the back of the theater. We all agreed it had to be Beck and Doug trying to scare us so that we could come out and leave. We got upstairs, and the pounding stopped. Doug was right. There was a sleeping bag rolled out on the ground with a few paper bags set up around it. Brad flashed a light in one of them and saw a syringe and something that looked like a vibrator. We were all pretty grossed out and had a little laugh about it. We looked around up there and didn't really notice anything else interesting. And we were staring back down the stairs when the pounding started again. We decided we should probably make our way to the exit. I hoped we hadn't been caught trespassing by the cops. We came out through the exit, and immediately both Doug and Beck were talking over themselves to tell us that about a minute after we entered, a really tall, homeless-looking, creepy man with greasy hair walked right past them, heading for the entrance. Meg said hello as he passed, and the guy stopped, turned, and kind of lunged a few inches towards him before stopping. One side of his face was really wrinkly. Beck thinks that he might have been a burn victim or something. The guy stared him down for a few seconds and then, without saying anything, turned and walked around the corner while we had gone inside. They started pounding on the door right after he was out of sight to try and warn us that there was a scary dude in there with us. We were in there for about 5 minutes with this guy and never saw him. He had to have heard us and hid somewhere. We started to walk back to our car in the Fred Meyer's parking lot about 100 yards away, and a car pulled into the parking lot and shined its headlights on us before flashing its red and blues. The police officers had us all sit down in front of the spotlight in front of the car and asked us what we were doing. We told them we were going to head inside the movie theater, but a really scary tall guy walked in, and we chickened out. He told us it was really dangerous to go into places like that as there had been violence in that building before, and it'd be a shame if we were going to be hurt doing something stupid. He let us go when we drove off, and we saw him shining a light inside the front entrance. We took the nice police officer's advice and never went into places like that again. I never did find out what violence he was talking about. It could have just been a tactic to scare us out of coming back. Regardless, we stuck to graveyards and cemeteries after this. Better to be safe than sorry, after all. Whilst prospecting out here in the Caribou region, I came across a set of rock piles known as Chinese piles out in the middle of nowhere. These being here means someone did a lot of digging back in the old days. So I started working, and after an hour and a half, I had about 10 grams of gold. Then, I was having a happy dance when I noticed the small standing stones on each of the rock walls. Each stone had several Chinese characters on them, and in a moment of dread, I realized that they were graves. But there was gold in a glass bottle I found nearby, and I left it behind. I also took down drawings of the symbols to show to a local historian who later confirmed my suspicions. Yes, they were graves, and they likely hadn't been seen in over 150 years. Chinese miners believed that if a miner died on site, the ground became cursed by the fallen spirit. So they wouldn't continue to mine the area, and they would tell anyone who they met in the area that it had been worked. And sometimes, they would do extra work to make it look like the site was finished off, so people wouldn't end up digging up their comrades. I've been back several times, but I won't dig there out of respect. The site is super creepy in the morning fog. You can almost see people's outlines sitting around the piles. I was a jail nurse for about 3 years in a correctional facility that housed approximately 1,300 inmates. I loved the job and would have stayed longer, but administration sucked. That's another story, though. Anyway, I worked the night shift and had some creepy stuff happen that just couldn't be rationally explained. I worked both booking and infirmary, but the majority of the incidents occurred in the infirmary. Okay, I was there maybe a month. Not a new nurse, but new to corrections. Anyone who has spent time at any jail will tell you that when those heavy doors slam shut, it's a very distinctive, definitive, loud sound. So, to get into the infirmary, you have to have a key or be buzzed in by central control. I'm sitting at my desk, and I hear the metal door outside my office click like someone from Central has unlocked it, and it opens about halfway and then just slams shut. Now, in my office, there's a huge glass window so that nursing staff can see any inmates that were about to enter. So when the door slammed, I thought it was just the officers messing around, and I jumped up and went to the window. Now no one was there. I called Central, and the officer that answered sounded like I had just woken him from sound sleep, and I said, "Ha ha, very funny." He had no idea what I was talking about, and I knew this officer, and I was surprised that he would go along with any type of prank because, frankly, he was kind of a jerk with absolutely no sense of humor. So, I thought it was some mechanical glitch. I sat down, and everything just changed. It felt colder, and I felt as if I were being watched. I was just all around uncomfortable. I took my stethoscope from around my neck and put it on the desk and left my office to go into the medical department. I stayed in medical for a few, talking to the staff in there, and then went back to my office. When I walked in, I went to grab my stethoscope off the desk to check an inmate, and it wasn't there. I looked on the desk, on the side, underneath, and it wasn't there. I should mention that when I left my office, I did lock the door as per protocol. Then I'm the only one on shift with the key. Now I think I'm going crazy, so I start looking everywhere, and I can't find it. Now, in my office, there is a large closet that holds all supplies. This is also locked with the key being on the set of keys that I carry. Later in the shift, I needed to go into the closet to get something. I really don't remember what. And sitting in the middle of the floor is my stethoscope. I picked it up, and the heavy metal door outside my office clicks again, opens halfway, and slams shut. I locked the closet, locked my office, and went out for a smoke. I was scared shitless, but I had responsibilities and patients to look after. So I go back in, and I swear the whole atmosphere felt lighter. It was warmer, and I just felt more comfortable. After my shift, the central officers rewound the tapes for me, and I saw the doors just open and slam shut with not a single person near them or in the hallway. I wish I could say that was the last time that happened, or that I became comfortable with it. I did not, because each time it happened, it seemed that the doors slammed harder, and that uncomfortable feeling lasted longer and longer. It almost felt like I was being stalked. Things that went missing were found in different parts of the jail. My pen case in the women's wing, my med sheets in solitary central controls room, my portable blood pressure in the kitchen. And each and every time, something of mine would show up in some other part of the jail. The officers and I would look at the tapes and see no one. Remember, I said I felt like I was being stalked? Well, that's because all these things happened to me, and no other nurse that worked night shift. Not one other nurse who worked on my days off had any doors click open or slam shut. Their stuff didn't disappear and then reappear elsewhere either. It was just me. Every officer and every one of the medical staff who worked there well before I got there swore up and down that this type of incident never ever occurred before. It got to the point for me that I started just not staying in my office. I just got all the stuff I needed for my shift and sat at the office desk. I did that until I left there to get another job, and I haven't had anything like that happen again since. I live in a house on a cul-de-sac with my mother, 2 brothers, and a roommate. I work 2 part-time jobs, one of which is in the same office my mom works at. She's a doctor, and I work with medical records. I'm 20, my 2 brothers, twins, are 17, and my mother is 57. The roommate is 18. We also live very close to a volunteer firehouse that blares an extremely loud alarm when there's an emergency. Everyone within a few miles can hear the alarm. We are middle class and live in a modest house but have a large front yard, as our driveway is super long. 7 years ago, we moved into our house, and for a while, everything was chill, until we found out about our crazy neighbor, Bob. He has extremely paranoid schizophrenia, and legitimately believes that the government is after him. He thinks that people are trying to brainwash him via microwaves, and he freaks out whenever he hears a plane pass, because he thinks they're after him. Whenever the firehouse blares the alarm, Bob calls the police because he thinks someone's after him, and every time they have to tell him that he can't do that. He also made some odd comments about one of my brothers, too. For a few years, we didn't hear much from him until one day he sent a letter in the mail trying to sell us his baseball cards for $1 million. Apparently, he sent the same letter to everyone else in the cul-de-sac. Everyone discarded their letters. All our neighbors are aware of Bob. They thought he was just a little crazy, but mainly harmless. We thought so too. We were wrong. Last winter, we began to find mysterious footprints in the snow. It was a human's footprints across the front yard of the house. We knew it wasn't any of our footprints because none of us walked so far out into that part of our yard like that. As I said earlier, our front yard is very large. We just shrugged it off as something odd, and for a while Bob hadn't bothered us, and we weren't thinking much of him at the time. Fast forward a few days, police were at Bob's house. Apparently, he's being evicted. We breathed a sigh of relief because he was weird, but we didn't think much of it. The next day was a normal day. Nothing odd until Bob showed up at work. He started to rant to everyone about how he's in the military before going to my mom's secretary, asking to have lab work done on him. This was raising a bunch of red flags because my mom never told him where she worked. Not only that, but to find my mom's secretary, you'd have to go back behind the main row of secretaries, as each doctor has their own, and there are about 15 in each, into a small area where a large printer is. My mom's secretary is in that smaller area, and it should be impossible for a stranger who hasn't been there before to know where she was. How the hell did Bob know where to find her and ask for my mom, despite never being there before and never telling him her name? This freaks us out, and we decided to do some research on Bob. It turns out his father was ex-military, and Bob owns a bunch of firearms. His shady behavior towards my mom and showing up at our work could only mean one thing. He was stalking us. And he's dangerous. At the very least, we began to suspect that he was going through our mail, as it's very likely his footprints were those that were in the snow. My mom got a peace order, it's kind of like a restraining order, and then notified all the other neighbors about what happened. We thought maybe things would die down, but nope. Today, he was in the parking lot, staring blankly at one of the secretaries. She said he was sweating and looking a little off. He didn't stop staring at her and asking about my mom. Now everyone in the family is on edge. He has guns, he's been stalking my mom at work, and he is being evicted. He doesn't have much to lose if he did something dangerous. We notified the police, and they are making sure to lock the doors and install security cameras so that we can see if he comes onto our property again. No one is allowed to be home alone until this crazy stops, and until we know for a fact that we will be safe. Also, my brother's roommates and I went to dinner with my dad and his girlfriend. Mom stayed home, and apparently my mom was home alone. She heard strange noises, and our dogs were going crazy. A few days after, he threatened to kill my brother, and we called the police. I just hope we don't meet again, as unlikely as that sounds. My story starts as me and my cousin were home alone on a warm summer's day. She and I were sitting on the living room floor, sewing, as that was the only interesting thing we could do that day. We had to find an open window as it gets really hot in Mount Shasta during this summer. The fan was blowing cool air into the overheated house. I can remember that it was not a windy day whatsoever. Remember this detail because it is very important throughout the story. Me and my cousin were just sitting there, having a conversation about something that I can specifically remember, when all of a sudden the fan falls out of the window. It was one of those box-like fans, and if I think about it now, even if it was wind, I don't think it would have been strong enough to knock it over. Me and my cousin thought it was a wonder, and first, so we picked the fan back up and continued sewing. Not that long after, I heard a crash and looked up to see the fan had fallen over by itself again. Once again, we chalked it up to the wind and put it back up. But then it happened again, and then again. We started getting a little skeptical. I went to see if it was the wind, but there was no wind or nothing. It was a nice, really hot summer's day. Right after that, all of a sudden, all the doors in the house started opening and closing constantly. We knew for a fact this was not the wind, as even the doors inside and outside the house were opening, like the bedroom doors, the laundry room door, the front door, and the garage door, etc. We got a lot spooked out, so my cousin ended up calling her ex-boyfriend's mom, who, according to my cousin, was a spiritual person and knew about this kind of stuff. This lady ended up answering the phone, and we quickly explained to her what was happening. She told us that we had to go find a Bible. I immediately went into my grandparents' room because I knew they had a few different Bibles in their closet. Once we got the Bible, the lady on the phone told us that we had to open it to a random page, then join hands. We joined hands, and then the lady told us to repeat after her. She then started saying some type of prayer that I had never heard before. We did as she asked, and repeated the prayer. The doors started opening and closing faster and more violently as we kept saying the prayer. Then, all of a sudden, the strangest thing happened. The second we said the final word of the prayer, everything just stopped. It got quiet. Everything went back to normal. This event has impacted me in quite a few different ways. I started becoming way more interested in all things paranormal and supernatural. I researched and found out all the information I could on all things paranormal. From all the research I have done, I have concluded that what was in that house was something called a poltergeist. A poltergeist is a type of ghost that is able to move or throw things, and is also capable of making really loud noises. This is the only type of ghost I could figure out that could move all those doors. I have since been back to that house, but also with equipment I have either made or purchased online. I have also experienced other things from doing this type of stuff. I think this experience will impact my life forever.